My wife's a Girl Scout leader. She would hold up her fingers and everybody would quiet down. I can't do that. Welcome. My name is Nick Carbone. I'm Nick's oldest son. You'll be hearing from me towards the end, and you'll hear from my brothers towards the end. We have a lot of people here, and we want to thank everybody for coming. Before we start, though, I want to take a moment. I want to thank George Levine for doing the eulogy at Mass for us. It meant a lot. It was heartfelt, and it helped us through an important moment. And he's not here, but I also want to thank Bill Curry, and I don't know if you... No, Bill Curry's not here. George is here. Bill Curry's not here. But Bill was on the radio on NPR, and he was on a show, and he opened with a line, something like, the first thing to say about Nick Carbone was he was a giving and loving man. And then he said, and I really want to say I love Nick a lot. So to open a conversation on the radio as a reflection meant a lot to the family, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. But we're here today with many fine people, and I want to get started right away with Father Frascadore. We'll do an invocation and say a few things. My one story about Father Frascadore is my father used to get teased every once in a while by his siblings about not going to Mass. And he would say back to them, when I took my walks with Father Frascadore, he used to tell me that a little atheism was a good thing. A little with my father was sometimes a lot. Father Frascadore.
Thank you very much. Can I say a little bit? Peter Kelly asked me if I would compose a prayer about Nick's life. And I said, if I could do it under 600 words, you're on. We're here this morning to honor the spirit and life of Nick Carbone. I met Nick on the new campus of the University of Hartford in 1961. I was the teacher in the Newman Club, and he was a student, I think. 20 of us met monthly to discuss social and political issues in light of the teachings of Christ. After I finished the opening prayer at the beginning of each meeting, Nick would raise his hand with a question, and that was it. The class was off and running for the next 45 minutes. I never had to prepare a lesson plan. I knew then that Nick was born for the platform. This was his chance to be who he was called to be. Called to be in his moments here with us in Hartford. Nick knew that all that keeps us from fulfilling his dream was fear. Tyrant fear keeps us from flying, taking risks, speaking before an audience. It shackles our feet to a stake, lest we go in search of the person we know we want to be and eventually will be. But we shatter those shackles the day we know that we need no other to define our life but ourselves. Then we are free to climb the highest mountain, go as far as our legs will take us, and speak the words the Spirit prompts. The secret to our singular definition is to have no fear. And that is what fear fears most, fearing that someday you will awake and fearlessly become the person you wanted to be. Nick never let fear get in his way. He wanted to be a spokesperson for the people of Hartford. And back in 1961, he wasn't going to let the chance pass for doing what he knew he wanted to do. That life is not about arrivals, It's about journeys. It's not about conclusions. It's about beginnings. It's not about grabbing. It's about reaching. It's not about satisfaction. It's about expectations. It's not about yesterdays. It's about tomorrows. It's not about achievements. It's about dreams. It's not about rest. It's about restlessness. It's not about fullness. It's about running over it. The secret is to live attentively, to live simply, to live fully, to discover every day that you have just begun. That is the ultimate revelation, to awake each morning aware that you are not done, but just beginning to become. With Nick's grace, I intrude his thoughts, the thoughts he has now, to end my words. No one knows us but ourselves, for we are alone, and we alone have walked our path, one footstep at a time, attentively. We have time now to retrace our steps and discover who we have become, far different from who we thought we'd be when we stepped first upon the path. The discovery need not be for publication. It's ours alone and appreciated in silence. We fear the day when someone will attempt to define who we were without knowing the path. I saw Nick for the last time on October 27th in 2014 in Carbone's restaurant on Franklin Avenue. He was talking with a friend. I interrupted them to say, "Hello, Nick." Nick smiled as only he could and introduced me as his teacher. I said, "No, Nick, it's the other way around." Amen.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm here making believe I'm Peter Kelly. At what is genuinely a celebration. Nick would not want us to be mourning, he would want us to be celebrating. During his longest wake in history, the 90 days that he called his own wake, he saw hundreds of people that are close, or part of his life, and among those was Chris Dodd. Chris Dodd actually came here to see Nick and saw him at his apartment, and they had a 1-hour talk. As I understand it, Chris, being sensitive to fatigue, noticed Nick was getting tired. Anyway, Chris wishes very much he could be here, so he asked me to read this letter that he himself wrote, because I know he talked to me from time to time last week when he was writing it. So this is to the family and friends of Nick Carbone. I deeply regret that I am unable to be with you to celebrate and pay tribute to Nick's life. As you will hear from others today, all of us remember Nick as a deeply, deeply loyal friend and a man completely devoted to his family. I also remember Nick as a remarkable, unique public man. So allow me to briefly share my feelings about Nick Carbone, the public man. Nick was a great pal, for it was a sheer joy for those of us who love the political fray, love the give and take of a good political brawl, just to be with him. But Nick was also so much more than a friend and a mere political player for a few decades in the life of his beloved Hartford. Hartford was Nick's stage, but Nick's ideas, his vision, his convictions, his passion were less about place and more about people. People who were the marginalized, the forgotten, the left behind, the damaged ones, economically, socially, educationally. He was certainly not unmindful of race ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation as victims of discrimination, but his touchstone, his passion, is for the poor, the unemployed, the homeless, the sick, the less educated, those who could not speak or petition for themselves. Those were Nick's people, and for many reasons, but most of all, I love the man. I was a 29-year-old candidate for Congress to Eastern Connecticut when I first met Nick in 1974. The big political race that year was a Democratic nomination for governor. Nick was deeply involved in the race, yet he took a great interest in me and in the 2nd District race. Nick's political influence in the 60 small towns in Eastern Connecticut was marginal at best, but his ideas, his contributions, his energy, and determination about how to make our state and country strong again were powerful to this young candidate and had a huge influence on me. But to confine Nick's contributions to the public discourse, to his passions and ideas, would be to miss his prodigious political skills. An incredible ability to knit people in constituencies, usually hostile to each other, together in a common cause and purpose. Nick was a brilliant political organizer, and he taught me the value of creating political alliances with people and organizations for the benefits of others. In Nick's world, there were no permanent political enemies, only potential political allies. Over the next 4 decades, Nick and I maintained a wonderful relationship. We spoke and met often. Some of my favorite memories of Nick are gatherings at Dick Sussman's home on Bushnell Park, for Sunday brunch with a wildly diverse collection of people, arguing about politics, candidates, public policy, and almost anything else that would provoke a debate. At the center of it all was Nick Carbone. He was the leader. What a joyous time, what great memories, what a difference he made for so many. The litany of his successful efforts in Hartford and Connecticut and our nation, I will leave others to enumerate. Just days before Nick died, Dick Sussman and I flew up from Washington to spend a little time with Nick. So I'm so glad I made the trip. Nick was very aware of his time was short, but as we sat and talked for several hours, as strange as this may sound, it was as if we had gone back in time. I was 29 again, listening to Nick tell stories, proposing solutions to create change, and bring hope and opportunity to the left out, Nick's people. We were reminiscing and telling stories about times past, but very quickly, Nick began talking about today and tomorrow, about Hartford, about our country, about the world and world affairs. The Middle East, drug prices, housing, transportation, new challenges and issues to be met, people and organizations to be brought together. Listening to him, it was as if Nick had a whole lifetime in front of him to make a difference, not just for a few remaining days. I felt sad leaving his apartment that day, this fall, knowing I would never see Nick again. But by that time, I walked out of his apartment building and I was smiling again. What a person. What passions. What hope. Here was my friend, dying, and he was talking about today and tomorrow with optimism and conviction that each one of us can make a difference. How appropriately we gather at this, the most joyous of all seasons, a time of hope, a time of peace, a time of caring for each other, to thank the man of hope and peace and love. So for some of us, as our own time winds down, and we think of those who made such contributions to our lives, I have been blessed with many. There have been few as important to me as Nicholas R. Carbone. Rest peacefully, my friend, with great affection, Chris. We're going to move to a series of vignettes, and obviously we're going to try and keep each of them a little small. I'm going to start that if you don't mind. I went to high school with Nick. We were members of the Buckley class of 1955. At the time, how many 55ers we got? Anyway,
Buckley.
It was an interesting time. Nick couldn't put 6 words together in any sequence. I don't think he had a thought in his head. When we would be down at a place we used to use down in Cromwell for our Friday night pre-football game things, the Hartford High guys, the Weaver guys would come down and start a fight. We'd go outside, we'd throw Nick in first, If he survived the first 2 punches, we'd get in. So years go by, my brother's Democratic town chairman. And one day he says to me, hey, I'm going to put a classmate of yours on the city council. I said, who? He said, Nick Carbone. I said, what are you talking about? He can't put 6 words together. He said, no, you got to sit down. So I did. We had lunch at the Sonesta. Remember the Sonesta? And I walked away from this 90-minute lunch bewildered by the incredible imagination, the incredible commitment, everything that Chris so well stated, which was part of his essence. He was an unbelievable character. We all know that. Almost everybody in this room dealt with Nick in a long period of time. Sometimes as fellow, sometimes as friend, sometimes as fellow. He was extraordinary. I told Nick in his last days, I said, Nick, I'm actually very close to finishing a book about me. It's actually not a book about me, it's a book of funny stories that happen in politics. All hilarious, having nothing to do with serious stuff. But I said, Nick, you don't know how much of an impact you've had on people's lives. You are one of the 3 people I would dedicate this book to. You had an immense impact on what I did, what I believed, what I worked for, and where I went. And it's with that thought I say, thank God for Nick. He was an incredibly important part of our lives. I'm not sure who's next. Thank you.
My name is Francesca Durant, and I'm reading for my mother, Francesca Carbone Matthews, who's in Florida and wishes that she could be here with all of you today. Nick was a beautiful, good, and loving man, and a wonderful brother. Some of the qualities that defined him and made him effective as a public servant, he developed and honed in our family. He was very intelligent and learned early on to question and challenge until he understood a situation or problem, taxing my mother's patience beyond belief. He actually turned her into a daily communicant as she prayed for the wisdom to deal with him. One of the opportunities he had to serve, nurture, and love was caring for me. He was 11 years old when I was born, and he saw that my mom needed some help and took over the nighttime bottles. We bonded. He became my protector, especially if someone was teasing me, not naming any names. We did close that 11-year gap and developed a mutual respect, peer to peer. He was my friend and even my traveling companion when my husband Jim was winding up his career and unable to take the time to travel to Italy with Carl, Lucille, and I. One quick story from the trip. Nick had just had bypass surgery earlier that year, and I was a little worried about him. After breakfast one morning, we started walking up a mountain near Lake Como towards a little chapel we could see from the road. I feigned exhaustion, stating that my pocketbook was heavy and that I needed to rest, hoping to slow Nick down. No way. Next thing you know, Nick is hiking up the mountain carrying my purse. You know how they say that things come full circle. This past summer, whenever I called to chat with Nick, he started answering the phone for my baby sister, Francesca. I would respond to my big brother, Nick. How he warmed my heart and soul with that greeting and the love that prompted it.